Hi guys, I'm Nicolette, and today we are here with Whitney Soule. She is the Senior Vice President and Dean of Admissions and Student Aid over at Bowdoin College in Maine. Thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
How are you today? Can you just give everybody a brief background about you? And I know we're going to talk a little bit about how the current situation, during the pandemic and is affecting college and applications and decision making. So
Yeah. Oh, there's so much to talk about. So, as you said, I'm the Dean of Admission and Student Aid at Bowdoin College, and we're, just to sort of put it into context, we're a small residential liberal arts college on the coast of Maine. We're about 2 hours north of Boston. And so our population is 18 to 22 years old. They come here to live in the same place where they're learning for college, and it's usually a super exciting, vibrant, sort of humming environment all the time. It is really strange right now that the campus is really quiet. And in my role as Dean of Student Aid, we're an institution that uses need-based aid, which means that we use all of our financial aid funding to support students who couldn't otherwise afford to be here. And we meet the students' financial need to be here without packaging loans. And we have a need blind admission process. So it's really a great access point for being able to go through the admission selection, choosing the students who we think will be great for the college without having to then check to see if we can afford them, and then package them as generous as we can, as I said, without loans. So it's a diverse community. It's amazing young people who are really curious and motivated and involved in a lot of things, both academically and in their personal lives here on campus.
So Whitney, given the current circumstances, are there any recurring themes you're seeing, with new admissions or, students who were planning on coming? What are you getting?
Yeah, there are a lot of things. Not surprisingly, I've been asked a lot in the last couple of weeks. What about coming in the fall, right? What if Bowdoin is not going to be traditional full enrollment on campus doing what everybody expected the college experience to be like? What's going to happen? And I mean, anybody who's been sort of following how colleges are handling this, I think every college is trying to think about what's safe, right, for not just our students, which obviously we're responsible to them, but to the community and where our college is, and the people who work at the college who have to come and go from the college. And so trying to think about what can we do to embrace and deliver the values and qualities that make an experience like ours so special, if we need to do it safely in a remote environment or hybrid environment. And what that leads to is a lot of students who, when they applied this year to go to college in the fall, at that application time, they were planning to go to college in the fall, like on campus, and live there in dorms and stay up late, talk to their friends, and go on outing club trips. And a lot of questions: could I stop out? Like, could I defer? Could I pause? And there are really good reasons for that. I mean, I understand that. Students work really hard to get to this point, and they want it how they imagined it. I also think that this virus is not yet at all contained. I think we all know that. There's still plenty of time before we have vaccination. And so we're trying to encourage students to think about, this is the way we're going to be living for a while, right? In the face of a virus that is a threat and moves. And to think about how to take on college as it is right now, right? To still be part of that squad that you got admitted with. Students who've applied to our school or any school usually were really intentional about where they wanted to apply. They worked really hard to get there. They picked the school that they wanted to go to. And those same people are going to be in the classroom, even if it's virtual or it's thinned out some way. Same faculty that you wanted when you were applying, thinking they were going to be standing in front of you, are the same faculty who are going to teach you otherwise. There's a lot of, well, if I can't do it in person, then I'm just going to do it online at X and fill in the blank. And what we're trying to say is, online is not what you had in mind, but if it needs to be remote or some aspect of it needs to be remote, the heart and soul of the institution you wanted in the first place is driving that remote experience, and still pretty important. So try to help students think about, if you're waiting till you get it how you want it, you might be waiting to start school for a really long time.
Right.
So come on with us. You're part of history. The class of 2024 will always be always be the class that started college in the pandemic, and there's something really bonding about that.
So then what resources are out there for students right now to kind of get more comfortable with the situation? Or is there anything in particular that you guys are doing to kind of welcome this next class?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think in some ways, for students to get the answers they need for those questions, they need to speak directly to the school that they're planning to attend, right? Because where the school's located and the virus implications geographically, are really different right now. But I think I can make a generalization and feel good about it, in that there isn't a college leadership team on the planet right now that is not working night and day to think about how to deliver the very best experience, knowing that what we all experienced in an emergency pivot to remote work or learning this spring, because it was entirely unplanned, was about as clunky as remote anything could be, right? For those who weren't planning for it. That was an emergency, right? So how students are thinking about what it was like to finish up high school remotely or even our students, what it felt like to finish up this term remotely, is not the experience that we would be bringing to our students in the fall if we needed to be remote, or if some part of it needed to be remote. Because I think we have time to plan for that.
Right.
We're still building community. A big part of a residential school is the fact that students build these really important friendships and community circles around activities and interests. And that will still happen. Our students, we hope we can bring students back to campus, but we're planning out lots of different scenarios, right? And if that means not all students could be here at once, or they can't come right at the start of the year, but we're going to start the year remotely, our kids are all getting assigned to dorms, right? They're going to be the first floor of Maine dorm, right? And that's their dorm floor, and they have their RA, and they have their proctor, and our student affairs and res life teams are thinking about, how do we organize connecting people, rather, we don't just throw up our hands and say, well, I don't know what to do now, right? It's like, all we're talking about is, how do you build community when it's not sitting right in front of you in the way that you're used to doing it?
So do you think it's going to be phased? Like, for instance, maybe it's online, then you're going to have, students in the class, and then in the dorm, is that sort of like the last phase, like the residents?
I think schools are thinking about it differently. I mean, we haven't decided yet what we're doing. We've had 3 different teams working all the time on sort of 3 different aspects of thinking about what next year would look like. One is, what would it mean to return to campus safely? Mm-hmm. So how far apart how do we have to have students living? How many people can be in a room? How do we manage bathrooms? How do you think about how many people can be in a classroom? And even like these tiny little things, like we're small schools, so most of our classes are fairly small, like seat up to maybe 35 people, but we do have rooms for lecture type classes as well that could seat 120. And they're theater style, right? Well, one of the things we're learning is, even if you space people out sort of 6 feet away in that room, obviously you can't fill it, but there's something about by being in a theater style and sitting above one another, and then the way that the droplets fall when people breathe or talk or cough, that you have to think about like much greater distance
right
on the vertical than the horizontal, right? So even just trying to think through, like, what classrooms can we use? How many people could we have at a time? So we're thinking, one option would be if we could bring our students back, and even if everybody were living here and we spread them out safely for their living experience, they might take some classes online, like take 2 classes in the classroom and 2 classes remotely, even while they're here on campus, right? Just
so even from their dorm, they would.
Yeah, just to make sure all the classes can keep going without cramming kids into room. So that's one thought.
Which actually gives you some, access to professors on campus if you need them, if you need to see them in person. Some people just work better in
Right.
that environment. So that gives you that opportunity, even if you're virtually taking that class, to meet with them safely. And, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and schools like ours that are residential also, there's a lot of services and experiences built in besides the classroom one, right? So there's our student affairs is managing athletics and activities and mental health and wellness. And we have a Center for Learning and Teaching where it helps students with writing papers and study skills, and so those things really matter to be on deck and fully functional for students. Easier to do when you're on campus and can go see we all prefer to see people in person, right? So in thinking about how to open a college, it's not just where does kids sleep, how do we feed them safely, and how many people can we have in a room? It's sort of how do you make sure that all of these many different functions that are essential for the kind of experience that we provide can still happen and students feel like they know how to access them, they feel taken care of, and it feels personal, even if some of it has to be like the way we're talking to one another right now.
So do you have any kind of advice or tips for students who are now going to enter their virtual learning experience? Maybe they're going to college for the first time, but now they're also virtually going to college for the first time. Right. What do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, going to college is a courageous thing to do in the first place, right? It's sort of a rite of passage of separating from your family. Even if you're not in a residential experience and you may be commuting to school, you're still sort of in this crossover into adulthood that separates you from the high school experience, right? And so, and then particularly in a residential one, students are leaving home and going to college. So there's a certain amount of courage in that anyway. You are meeting new people and a new way of learning and maybe going to a new place. This amps up the courage requirement, I think, in some ways that I think can be really inspiring if students are able to look at it that way. When I was saying earlier, this is historic. This is the class. This will always be the class of 2024 that started college in a pandemic, right? Like it's just a point of history. And to sort of decide to be part of that in a full way, there's no doubt that it's scary. The idea of starting college without those relationships built in that our returning students have when they think about what next year might look like, we get that that's different. But back to what I was saying earlier, that whole experience of connecting to people personally is what we do. That's our strength. So there will be opportunities in place for students to latch on to that and to follow those leads and to accept those invitations to do things as a first year, even if it's remote, that will begin to build a community. Where I think it could get really scary for students is if they're intimidated by that, which is totally understandable, and they hold back, then it could feel really isolating. And so my tip is respond to those invitations, right? When student affairs is saying, here's how you can connect to your roommates, do it, right? Like your virtual roommates maybe. Right. Here's how you can connect to our virtual escape room activity, which we've been doing this spring. And we had 900 students in an escape. I don't know how it worked, honestly, I didn't do it, but we had 900 people getting together in the Bowdoin community trying to go through an escape room on a Friday night. So to do those things, right? Like those are how you start to make friends, even if you're not hanging out in the dining hall together.
Yeah. Well, at least they won't miss the crappy, university eating.
Well, that may be true in some places, but Bowdoin has, and Bowdoin is actually often, you just gave me a great opportunity to plug our food because
there you go.
We've gotten a lot of attention over the last couple of decades for having amazing college food. So food is actually something that bonds our students together. And the dining hall. So for a lot of students, this was heartbreaking. Although I will say, we had about 47 students who did not leave campus when we went to remote because they had personal circumstances that made it impossible for them to leave. And so they stayed with us. And, for a campus that normally is 1,800 students, we have 47. We don't really need full-on dining component, right? But we do have to feed these students. And our dining staff, because they love food so much and love being known for making good food for college students, they made the most unbelievable food for our kids, and like took special requests and brought them special desserts. And
I think you're gonna have 1,800 students telling you they have special requests to live on campus. There's good eating.
But they already do that, like for real. Before we went into COVID, our students had an opportunity to submit their favorite home recipes to our dining staff, who could try to replicate them at scale.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool. And
yeah.
Talking about Hofstra had great food.
Okay, well, where I went, and I'm not going to say where, but you guys could look it up, but it was horrible.
Well, Whitney, I do want to touch on one last thing. Recently I saw an article you wrote about how to look for a college in a pandemic, and I was wondering if you could share some of that with our audience. Some of the things that they should be really keeping an eye out for if they are preparing, if they are not quite in college yet, but they are
right.
For college.
Yeah, this is a really key time for students who would normally be visiting colleges, maybe finishing their junior year and getting ready to think about applying to college. They probably would have normally been taking standardized tests this spring and meeting with their college counselors to develop some college lists. And so everything is sort of disrupted in that way. And one of the things that I think is really important for students to understand as it relates to test taking is Bowdoin's actually a test optional school. We were actually the first test optional school in 1969. So for more than 50 years, we've been test optional, but that still a lot of our students who apply submit tests. And even more importantly, most students in the country are aiming to take standardized testing because it's required for most college admission, right? When students sign up to take standardized testing, they have an opportunity to opt in for colleges to search on them and get their name and mailing information and email and whatnot. And so it's a really passive way of, I'm going to sit down to take this test, which I need to do. I'm going to check this box. And before they know it, colleges like Bowdoin have their name and where they are and what they're interested in. And we start sending them mail, and then they become part of our mailing list and they can learn about a place like Bowdoin. Without that, that's thousands of schools that students don't have reaching for them, right? They didn't really have to do very much except sit for the test. And a lot came to them, and they wouldn't have thought about it very much. Likewise, this spring, we would have had probably 2,000 people visiting Bowdoin from February break through April, of juniors beginning to go look with their families and take tours and information sessions and so forth. And each one of those 2,000 kids would have signed up with us. They would have registered. We would know who they are. We would be mailing them information from now on. They didn't come, right? So there's a whole bunch of students, by just not doing the normal things, are not finding themselves on college mailing lists. And if they're not on mailing lists and they don't hear from us around, this is what our financial aid is like. This is the kind of programming we do for students like you. Here's how we can connect you to current students who have your interests. Like all these things that we do, we need to know who the kids are to connect to them. So the call to action really is, if you're a junior in high school or sophomore, but really for juniors who are going to be running right up into this, you're going to need to be more active than you might have expected in college searching, and start doing, there are a lot of great search engines out there. The College Board has a really good one that you can sort of put in some general criteria of what you think you might be interested in. The list will probably be big, and you can find ways to whittle it down to start to look at schools, but to go to those schools' websites and actually fill out an information form. If you don't like what you're getting, just unsubscribe from it, right? You're not committed forever, but it'll be helpful for students to sort of actively think, oh, maybe there's more to know about this school. And browsing the website is not the same thing. Browsing the website, you can find what you're looking for, or what you think you're looking for. But when you're on a school's mailing list, there's a whole bunch going on at that school you wouldn't know to look for that they know to tell you about. And so if you're not actually on the mailing list, there's only so far you're going to go in learning about something that might be important to you.
Do you think maybe social media is a good place for students to be looking as well? Because sometimes you get an inside look into, campus activities or, different things that you wouldn't see on a website. Maybe.
I think definitely, yeah. I think if what you're saying is sort of to follow like a college's Instagram or Facebook, yes, definitely. I think that's, and there are different, as you can imagine, there are different ways of following the college, right? So you can follow Bowdoin College on Instagram. You can follow Bowdoin Dog Spotters, right? Which is like every time somebody like comes across a dog on campus, they upload it to Bowdoin Dog Spotter with like a little interview about who the dog is. Cute, right? But you start to see these things that come up on Instagram for Bowdoin, and you're like, oh, there's a personality here, right? Around what people care about and what they're actually posting about, whether it's students or the institution. So yeah, I think social media is a great suggestion.
Are you guys doing any type of virtual tour, like of the university?
Yeah, that's sorry. Thank you for reminding me that. That's a great point. Some schools already had, and we were one of them, sort of professional virtual tours built for students pre-COVID who just couldn't come visit campus. And those are really great to watch. But the other thing that you just made me think of in asking about virtual is that all of us have had to pivot to doing virtual admission activities that otherwise would have been in person, right? Like our staff we would all be traveling right now, pretty much, going to college fairs and high school visits and doing presentations and meeting kids and their parents. And but instead we're doing that from our desktops or kitchen tables in the background. But we're doing information sessions, just what you would have learned if you'd come to campus, right? And you have a live admission officer like me telling you some things you would need to know, and then available for Q&A, and you can hear everybody's questions and answers, right? We have our students who help us in the admission office who are doing the same thing. We have online chats available where you might have called before to ask a question or just asked it if you came to visit. We have students and staff answering online chat questions throughout the day. Same with our student aid, who are doing information sessions about student aid, but also, virtual appointments to help people understand how to think through preparing for aid.
Thank you, Whitney. Brian, did you want to ask Whitney anything else before we wrap up?
I think we covered everything. I mean, it's really impressive to see what you guys are doing over at Bowdoin.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's funny. I was asked by somebody a little while ago, sort of was referencing, like, it's been a rough year on higher ed admissions, right? We had the Varsity Blues scandal and the Code of Ethics with the National Association that the Department of Justice sort of dismantled in some ways. And all these big things that were happening that were really stressful for people in my role. And that person asked me, like, how do you feel about your job now? And I was like, first of all, I have a great job, because people who work in admission like I do, we're reading the future every year, right? Like, we get to read high school students who are looking to pursue education to go on to do big things, whatever those big things might become. And we get this window into what's coming. It's amazing, right? It's really fun. But also, if there were ever a time to be crazy committed to doing this work well and to encouraging students and to being really clear about what's coming and how to go about it, this is it, right? Like, this is when the professionals in my space of higher ed, we have to be the best at it now. And so I'm really inspired, actually, rather than feeling like, oh, this is, it is really hard, but it's also like, this is what we do. And this is really important to figure out how to do it for students who are experiencing it like this.
That's great. Can you let everybody know Bowdoin's website so they can find out more about the school?
Absolutely. So it is bowdoin.edu. You can see Bowdoin College behind me. So it's bowdoin.edu, and you can find your way to the admission page, and tons of information there about what's available virtually. And eventually we'll be getting back to travel, so we could end up in students' hometowns or high schools. But for now, we're at a safe distance behind the computer screen.
Yeah, guys. So check out their website. Hey, they got a polar bear mascot. I mean, and everyone contact Whitney. I don't know if your email address is for admission, right? Yeah, but everyone contact Whitney. If you're interested in how they can help you, contact Whitney and find.
You can contact me. Our contact, you can see all the admission officers, including me, and our contact information on the admission page as a contact us, meet our team. Same for student aid. So yeah, let us know if we can help.
Yeah, check out Bowdoin, guys.
Thank you very much.